Hello and welcome to Worldview, a program designed to bring you up to speed with trending developments the world over. My name is Xavier Robert, reaching you live from Uyo, the Akwa Ibom State capital. And on our top stories today, India stops issuing visas to Canadian citizens amid an escalating row over the killing of Sikh separatists on Canadian soil. King of Morocco Mohammed VI reveals plan to rebuild parts of country hit by earthquake. Ukraine claims strike on Black Sea Naval Headquarters. Details of these stories and more in a moment. On our first report, India has stopped issuing visas to Canadian citizens amid an escalating row over the killing of a Sikh separatist on Canadian soil. India said the temporary move was due to security threats, disrupting work at its missions in Canada. Canada's visa services remain open in India, but according to reports, tensions flared this week after Canada's leader said India may have been involved in the 18th June killing. India angrily rejected the allegation, calling it absurd. India's government swiftly made clear the suspension of visa services also applies to Canadians in a third country. Meanwhile, the Indian Parliament has passed a bill that guarantees a third of seats for women in the lower house of Parliament and state assemblies. Reports say that the country is a long way away from seeing more women elected to its legislatures soon, since it will be implemented only after India completes the next census and an exercise to redraw the boundaries of constituencies. The complicated processes are expected to take several years. We'll recall that the Lok Sabha, or the lower house of parliament, approved the Nari Shakti Vandan Adhiniyam, which loosely translates from Hindi to Saluting Women Power Act, almost unanimously, with 454 of the 456 members of parliament present voting in favor. According to further reports, the upper house, or the Rajya Sabha, debated the bill and passed it unanimously. It now requires the president's signature, but analysts say that is a mere formality, and the bill is tantalizingly close to becoming law. Away from that, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has arrived in Canada for the first time since the Russian invasion. Videos showed Prime Minister Justin Trudeau meeting Zelensky and the First Lady on the runway in Ottawa. It comes after increasing doubts from international partners over how it should continue providing aid to Kiev. Zelensky arrived from Washington, where he had hoped to secure further funding, but it is unclear if U.S. Congress will back more aid. Earlier in the week, he urged world leaders to continue to support Ukraine to help fight off Russian forces at the United Nations in New York. Zelensky was joined by First Lady Olena Zelenska, where they were greeted on the tarmac by hugs from Canadian officials, including Trudeau. And while Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has urged United Nations to strip Moscow of its veto power during the United Nations Security Council meeting, clad in his trademark military fatigues, Zelensky, for the first time since the February 2022 invasion, sat in the same room as a Russian official, who responded by scrolling through his smartphone with a look of conspicuous disinterest. Zelensky said that most of the world recognizes the truth about the Russian and Ukraine war, that is, criminal and unprovoked aggression by Russia against his nation, aimed at seizing Ukraine's territory and resources. Zelensky called on the United Nations to vote to end Russia's veto power on the Security Council, where Moscow joins only Britain, China, France, and the United States in being able to block any resolution. In the meantime, Ukraine has claimed responsibility for a strike on the headquarters of Moscow's Black Sea Fleet on the Russian-annexed Crimean Peninsula. At least one Ukrainian missile had struck the headquarters in the Crimean port of Sevastopol. Local Governor Mikhail Razvohayev says. Now, the Kremlin says it is unavoidable that tensions would grow between Kiev and its European allies amid an escalating dispute between Ukraine and Poland, sparked by disagreements over grain exports. At least one person was killed in Russian shelling in the southern Ukrainian city of Kherson. Now, still in another development, one of Ukraine's staunchest allies, Poland, has said it is no longer supplying weapons to its neighbor amid a diplomatic dispute over Kiev's grain exports. The Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki said Poland's focus was instead on defending itself with modern weapons. But the country's president, Andrzej Duda, later said the comments had been misinterpreted in the worst possible way. Duda said it was only new Polish weapons that would not be sent. In another development, Ukrainian officials have announced that a second grain ship has left the Ukrainian Black Sea port of Chernomorsk near the city of Odessa after making the inbound journey last weekend. According to Ukraine's infrastructure minister Alexander Kubrakov, the Palo-flagged vessel called the Ariat left the port after loading 17,600 tons of Ukrainian wheat for Egypt. Kubrakov said the vessel is the second ship carrying grain to leave the port this week, after a smaller ship left Chernomorsk on the Ukraine's temporary humanitarian corridor. Recall that Ukraine established the temporary corridor last month after Russia pulled out of a UN-brokered agreement guaranteeing safe passage for grain ships across the Black Sea. Away from that, a U.S. government contractor, Abraham Lemmer, who worked at the State and Justice Departments, has been arrested on charges for reportedly spying for Ethiopia. The Justice Department said that Lemmer, aged 50, a U.S. citizen of Ethiopian descent, was arrested on August 24 and is charged with providing national defense information to a foreign government. In a statement announcing Lemmer's arrest, the Justice Department did not name the country he was allegedly spying for, but it was identified by the New York Times and other U.S. media outlets as Ethiopia. According to an affidavit filed by an FBI investigator, Lemmer carried out his espionage activities between December 2022 and August 2023, depositing tens of thousands of dollars in cash into bank accounts in the Washington region. In a separate development, the King of Morocco, Mohammed VI, has stated that the nation will spend $11.6 million to rebuild parts of the country hit by the September 8 earthquake. While stating this, he said the money will be used to support more than 4.2 million people affected by the disaster. Reports say the 6.8 magnitude earthquake killed more than 2,900 people and injured over 5,000 others, the strongest recorded in the North African country in more than 60 years. After the break, Sudan Army Chief warns war could spill over into neighbors. Stay with us for details on this and more right after the break.
Spectrum TV, broadening your horizon.
Business exists only to meet the needs of the people, but there's an extra advantage if your product and services are pitched on a platform that gives you the added advantage over your competitors. For your desired return on investment and so much more, advertise on Spectrum Television, on StarTimes DTH Channel 421 and on free-to-air with a frequency of 12733. Spectrum Television, broadening your horizon.
Thanks for staying tuned. We move on now, where the head of Guinea's junta, Colonel Mamadi Doumbouya, has defended the use of military intervention in politics during a UN address following a recent series of coups on the African continent. He told the UN General Assembly, speaking in French, that Africa is suffering from a model of governance that has been imposed on the continent, stressing that a model that is certainly good and effective for the West, which designed it over the course of its history, but which is having trouble adapting to reality. Reports say that Doumbouya came to power in a coup in September 2021 after 11 years of civilian rule. He said that from his experience, he has better appreciated the extent to which the model has, above all, contributed to maintaining a system of exploitation and pillaging of resources by others, and very active corruption of elites. He called on Africa's young and old to break with the old world order while defending non-alignment. Away from that now, African governments have called on the UN Human Rights Council to terminate the mandate of a team of human rights experts on Ethiopia after the submission of its latest report earlier this week. The expert panel said war crimes and crimes against humanity were still being committed despite the signing of cessation of hostilities agreement officially ending the war in Tigray. It further stated that violent confrontations are at a near national scale. The call stands in stark contrast to calls by global rights watchdogs like Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch for the mandate to be extended amid renewed violence in northern Ethiopia. Moving on now, protesters have set fire to a mayor's office on an Indonesian island to demand compensation over a mining company's activity in their area. Police disclosed this, adding that several arrests had been made. According to reports, the growing presence of mining companies on Indonesia's main islands has caused riots and clashes in recent years over poor working conditions and land encroachment. The unrest began in Pohuwato Regency in Gorontalo province on mineral-rich Sulawesi Island, when a march involving some 2,500 protesters approached the local mayor's office, but no official was willing to meet with them. Gorontalo police said on its website, quoting spokesman Desmond Hajendro, that regarding the demo, the police are still working hard to investigate the riot that happened during the demonstration in Pohuwato. Away from that, Sudan's de facto leader, General Abdel al-Burhan, has warned the United Nations that the country's war could spill over into neighboring African nations. In a speech at the United Nations General Assembly, Burhan also argued that the Rapid Support Forces should be considered a terrorist group, as they had supported killing, burning, raping, forced displacement, looting, stealing, torture, trafficking of arms and drugs, as well as bringing mercenaries into the country. General Burhan said his party was open to peace talks to put an end to the war, saying that the RSF had refused. Meanwhile, his opponent, General Dagalo,